and find my camera now and all that good stuff. So
Perfect.
yeah,
And I'll
hey,
bring in a little bit later.
thank you so much, and try to
You're
stay
welcome.
warm today.
Okay, you too. Okay,
And be
take
safe.
care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Okay, camera. Where's my camera? Can't find the
Hey,
camera.
everybody, make sure that you are muted. We will start in a couple of minutes. Thank you so much for joining us on this snowy day.
I can't find my, oh, there we are. I'm on to Lisa, okay.
Why is this in safe driving mode? That's great.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this snowy day. I think we're smarter than the rest out there. Hey, Carrie Turk. Hey, Lorraine, who are out in this craziness. But man, we definitely need the snow. We were in the mountains recently and they have been dumped on. Our driveway up there was 16 inches of snow. So we definitely need it here. So I'm definitely grateful for it, but more grateful that I'm here in my cozy house. So guys, this is one of the biggest Q&As that we have ever had. So bear with us. We are going to try to keep this as calm as possible and get your questions answered. Our Q&As last for 1 hour. Not like our 2-hour classes, which I think many of you, I recognize a ton of your names here, have already taken. So if we don't get to your questions today, in our follow-up email, we will have the links to our Airbnb 101 class, which is 2 hours, and our All About Accessory Dwelling Units class, which is also 2 hours, and we would highly encourage you guys to take those. So a couple of things off the bat, please keep yourself muted unless you want to speak. It's probably better if you go ahead and put your questions in the chat. I think that's how we will kind of keep this as organized as possible. A great shout out to one of our favorites, Lisa Spence, who is hosting us today. I'm not sure that she can talk. I think she might just be listening today, but Lisa, if you want to chime in at any time, please do so. We love you. You are wonderful to partner with on classes. And if you can introduce yourself at some time during this class, we'd love to see your cute face. If not, I'm sure everybody on this call knows you and loves you. Your work speaks for itself and your heart speaks for itself even bigger. You are so wonderful, Lisa. So let's get started. I am Lisa Karen Welch. For those of you who do not know me, I am an educator and do community outreach for the company ADU for You. They are a modern carriage house builder. I've decided after 6 years of practice of preaching about short-term rentals and ADUs that we are going to practice what we preach, and we are building one in our backyard. So follow me on social media and my newsletter to kind of see how that is going. I can tell you that it's been so much fun, and thankfully working with ADU for You, they've absolutely handled everything for us and we haven't had to do anything. So I teach the class with Sabrina Calnan, my better half. I call her the brains in operation here. We teach all about ADUs. We teach Airbnb 101. I teach a personal branding class. It's been really fun. I am a member of Denver Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, which keeps me my finger on the pulse of everything that's happening here in Denver with short-term rentals. And I was just asked to sit on ADU for Denver Advisory Committee that will start the middle of February. And I'm so excited about that. We are hoping to make some really positive changes in Denver here, cut some of the red tape to make it easier to build accessory dwelling units. So I'm going to introduce my partner in crime, who I simply adore, Sabrina Calnan.
Thanks so much, Lisa. So excited to be here today and be doing this question and answer with you guys. It gives us really the opportunity to have a more interactive session with all of you. And we have gotten your questions ahead of time, so we've reviewed those. We'll try to hit up everyone's questions and make sure we address as much as we can in this Q&A today. But my name is Sabrina Calnan. I am the founder of B&B Excellent. I am an Airbnb expert and guide. So I have co-hosted over 35 rentals. I also have some skin in the game in that I have a carriage house that I rent out short-term through Airbnb on my own personal property. I also have a condo that I rent out on Airbnb as a 30-day plus rental, because those are the rules and regulations for a non-primary residence in Denver. I am an Airbnb ambassador, and I've helped nearly 500 hosts start their listings with Airbnb. So here to answer all of your questions, my services, we can talk about after the class if you like, but we'll send a follow-up email. I offer consulting services. I teach you how to maximize your Airbnb revenue, and also help to educate people on Airbnb in general. So I will turn it back over to Lisa, I guess.
So it never fails that the mail carrier comes exactly when I start teaching. So if you hear the dog in the background, that is what's happening. Our mailman is his absolute favorite person, as most dogs are. Carrie, you understand that one, don't you? Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, what exactly an accessory dwelling unit is. Please don't feel bad if you don't know what that is, because we have a lot of real estate agents that actually come back to us who ask, what exactly is that? So an accessory dwelling unit, which we will refer to as an ADU because it's just simpler, is an accessory to your home. So it is basically a small home that can be in your backyard, so it can be detached. It can be attached, so it can be a garage. It can be above a garage. And it can even be a basement unit as long as it is done well. So these things are used for short-term rental. They are used for long-term rental. They are used for downsize. That is what we may use ours for, because we have recently become empty nesters. And when you look at this market, it doesn't really make sense right now for us to downsize. It seems like financially it might be a lateral move. So that is the potential for ours. It can be a granny flat. It can be a nanny flat. It can be multi-generational living, which we are finding a lot of that. Many of the things that the projects they are working on now are for parents of people who live in the primary residence to have them come live with them. We know that probably right now a assisted living, even without assistance in Denver, is running between $7,000 to $9,000 a month. So the savings that would allow a family would be monumental if you can have your parents living in an accessory dwelling unit. So that's been a big one. Several of our projects are that too, are for that purpose. So really, it's just an incredible way to make money with your current asset. And we love educating you and your clients on that. I receive calls every day from real estate agents who have buyers who are currently looking for a situation where they can purchase something and add an accessory dwelling unit to it for rental income. So I would be your primary contact for that, and I will dig deeper for you all to find out whether or not it's allowed where they're looking, what the zoning is. There are a lot of criteria in terms of size, height. There's a lot that go into this. Last week, and I posted this on social media if you saw this, I had a real estate agent who connected with me who said they have a buyer looking for this situation and their parents are handy and they think that they can build an accessory dwelling unit for her for rental purposes between 10 and 20K. I said, oh my gosh, thank goodness you connected with me. That is not possible. And they are going to throw away 10 to 20K and find out later on that they cannot short-term rent it. They cannot long-term rent it. If they go to get a license for either short-term or long-term, there will be an inspection involved. And there's no way you can do this for that amount of money. The startup costs are 25K. So you are looking at a minimum of 200K all the way up to ours is going to be close to 400. This is building a small home. This is not a she shed in your backyard. So right off the bat, I want you guys to be super clear and set your clients up with that expectation that this is not a 10 to 20K build here. You are looking at a minimum of 200K. Permits need to be pulled. It needs to be up to code. Egress windows. It has to have a kitchen, a living space, a bedroom, and a bathroom to qualify for an accessory dwelling unit. So I think that is one of the best ways that you can vet your buyers before you even send them our way. And we ask that question right off the bat is what is your budget? Now there is financing through ADU for you, and we actually utilize that. So there are options, but let's make sure that your buyers are realistic about this. Sabrina, I'm going to let you give a small definition of what short-term rental is in Denver.
Yeah, so before I go on, please do feel free to start throwing your questions in the chat. If we're able to, and we have time, and it seems like it'll be easy to manage, we can let you all unmute and you can ask questions popcorn style as well. It's always fun to make these interactive, and it's just not us talking at you. Really, this is a Q&A session, so we do want to see your questions in there. But to get started, so short-term rental. Short-term rental is any rental that is rented out less than 30 days at a time. Other terms for short-term rental, people use Airbnb, Vrbo, interchangeably with short-term rental. With short-term rental and with ADUs, the things that they have in common is that the rules and regulations are really done city by city and county by county. And I know we had a lot of questions about that when you guys registered for the class. So we'll be speaking about that a little bit as we go through the class. As we've been teaching our Airbnb 101 class, and as I've been working with clients over the years, everybody is interested in short-term rental, whether it be here in Denver or up in the mountains. And what we are seeing right now is just an incredible amount of change in the short-term rental space. Places that never had short-term rental regulations are now implementing regulations. There is a lot of new regulation coming out and revisions to regulations coming out. So the reason that we do these Q&As and we do the Airbnb 101 is so that we can help you educate your clients when they're going to purchase a short-term rental, because it is ever changing. And so we're here to answer your questions on all of that. Accessory dwelling units, they are extremely popular. I think one of the reasons they're extremely popular is because it can be an extremely lucrative short-term rental, especially in areas in the Denver metro area, where a short-term rental in most of the Denver metro area does need to be your primary residence. That's definitely the case for Denver, where I'm located. I'm located in the West Wash Park neighborhood. And I can tell you what's been so cool about having an accessory dwelling unit on my property. And I was like one of the luckiest people in the world, I think, because when we went to go purchase our home in 2012, which was a great time to buy also, we were specifically looking for something where if we wanted to move away, that we knew we could cash flow on that property right away. And what that meant was buying a property with an accessory dwelling unit. Mine happens to be like up to code, zone for it, permitted, all on the up and up. And we got so lucky with that. What you'll find if you're working with clients that are looking for accessory dwelling units is that so many of them have been there for a long time, but permits were not updated, use permits weren't updated. Some of them were built without being zoned appropriately, things like that. So we got super lucky with ours. But what I love is we started short-term renting our unit probably about 6 years ago. We converted it from a long-term to a short-term rental. And on my primary residence, it's extremely lucrative. And that little carriage house covers the cost of the mortgage on my entire home. So it can be really amazing, and it can be really great for first-time buyers to sort of participate in this short-term rental market. Once again, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So maybe, Lisa, what do you think? We could start going through some of the questions that people have put in, just so we can address everything for people.
That sounds great. Do you have those?
I do. Let me just open those up real fast here. Okay. So we did get a lot of questions about the rules and regulations on short-term rentals in both Evergreen, Lakewood, Conifer, Jeffco County. Seems to be incredibly popular with this group. Lisa, do you want to talk to accessory dwelling units in those areas?
Sure. So we only build in Denver and surrounding, so I cannot really speak in terms of ADUs for the mountains, but Sabrina and I can definitely speak to you about the rules and regulations on short-term rental. I think Lakewood was a question, is that correct, on ADU? And I can answer that one.
Yes.
We are really, ADU for you right now is really trying to put together something that you guys can go to get this information. Currently, it is not something you can Google. I have to really dig and research for you to make sure that we are getting you the right information. And a lot of times I actually have to call the city, because while most cities are really doing a great job on their websites about short-term rental rules, ADU is still new to a lot of cities. Denver's is really good. But again, I think this committee is going to make sure that some changes are made there and updated. So your best bet, honestly, right now is to get to me until I can put something together. And it's going to be really basic because, like Sabrina says, this is job security for us. I cannot tell you how often this is changing. I mean, we update our Airbnb and ADU class probably monthly right now.
Mhm.
And it's always changing. So you never want to just say, I've got the answer, because in 6 months that could change, in a year it could change. For example, Littleton right now is not allowing accessory dwelling units. Cannot believe that. I get a lead on Littleton at least once a week, because their lots are so big and it's really perfect for accessory dwelling units. But the people of Littleton are pounding down, the government. They are asking, like, when they want it, they want it. So they're going to have to pay attention to this. So if accessory dwelling units are not allowed currently in a city, don't lose hope. That is going to change in 6 months to a year. We are seeing this rapidly evolve. We are seeing blanket rezones all over Denver right now. What was it? It was West Wash Park, I believe, that just blanket rezoned. We've not Wash Park, Colfax. I always say that, Sabrina. West Colfax just rezoned. East Colfax rezoned. Chaffee Park is rezoned. Sloan's Lake, you guys, Sloan's Lake just rezoned for accessory dwelling units, blanket rezoned. That one was huge. And there are a ton in the hopper right now. So this is happening really, really quick. Right now, Regis Berkeley is working on it. Villa Park, Barnum West is working on it. Valverde, Athmar Park, and East Colfax, which did just hit. So we are seeing that there is a need for this. I don't have to tell you guys that inventory right now is sad. We need the inventory. We need short-term rentals. We need long-term rentals. We need accessory dwelling units. Gentrification is happening in a lot of these areas that have decided to blanket rezone. So that is definitely a consideration for the city, is people who are losing their homes, where they could actually save their homes by being able to afford to build an accessory dwelling unit and rent it out to help pay, or to have family members live there. So again, I cannot tell you how excited I am about this committee and the changes that are happening. And we just want this to become easier and easier for all of you and for your buyers and your families. So Lakewood does allow accessory dwelling units. The minimum square footage of the lot, so this is what's going to be the hiccup here for Lakewood, is 7,500 square feet for the lot. That's big. So again, this may change. Height restriction is 25 feet. And there is actually not a limited number currently for ADUs. But again, you want to get with me, because there is a lot of things that I want to go over with you in terms of size, what is allowed, what is your plan. And again, I'm wondering if Lakewood is going to reduce that lot size. That's a really big lot size. But a basement, right? So a basement unit would definitely be an option. And perhaps well, again, you couldn't do a garage or above a garage either, unless that is the square footage currently. I cannot say currently enough as we are answering these questions. So again, Lakewood does allow for those, and just get with me. Really, literally, all I need is an address, and I can do the digging for you, and we can figure it out. I'm thinking that maybe that lot size is going to be reduced. Our lot size is 10,000 square feet. The maximum ADU you can build on a lot that size is 1,000 square feet on the bottom and 750 on top. So what they're allowing is 75% from the bottom size on top. And that may change as well too, because that seems kind of silly to me, that's 75% on top. So again, always changing. The rules for accessory dwelling units here in Denver is that, so I'll use our personal example. If we decide that we are going to downsize to our accessory dwelling unit, we can only short-term rent our primary residence. I'm sorry, I'm fibbing. If we downsize to our accessory dwelling unit, we can only long-term rent our primary residence. Currently, you cannot short-term rent the primary if you are living in the ADU. If you are living in the primary, you can short-term or long-term the accessory dwelling unit. Does that make sense? Okay. That I think is a rule that could be questioned as we go along as well, because that doesn't really make much sense either, right, Sabrina?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason that a lot of people are interested in having an accessory dwelling unit to downsize to is so that they can fund their retirements. And if you can short-term rent your main home, the larger home, certainly a lot of times that will be more money to help fund a retirement. So it defeats the purpose of an accessory dwelling unit in some ways, to restrict that in that way where only the accessory dwelling unit can be short-term rented. But to go back just a little bit, I'm looking at these questions that we have in the chat here. So Sandra, to answer your question, call Lisa to verify whether or not an ADU is permitted in the area. To go back to the rules and regulations, because I know a lot of people were interested in that for Evergreen, Conifer, Lakewood, Jefferson County. So Evergreen and Conifer don't currently have rules and regulations for short-term rentals. They fall under the rules and regulations for Jefferson County. Jefferson County allows short-term rentals, non-owner occupied or owner occupied, currently on any properties that are on an acre of land or more. Now, there has been discussion of reducing that requirement for the amount of land. It just hasn't happened yet. But right now, Evergreen, Conifer, Jeffco County are allowing that for non-primary residences. City of Lakewood has really gone back and forth on their ordinance for short-term rental. They were planning on passing the ordinance, which they sort of started discussing like way back in 2019 for short-term rentals in Lakewood and making it a primary residence rule. But they took a step back from that. They wanted to revisit it a little bit more before they passed the ordinance. Lakewood is really thinking long and hard about it. They're looking at things like, how many parking spaces do we require? What occupancy levels are we letting people have on their short-term rental? And once again, they are moving to that primary residence rule. So I would not advise that clients have short-term rentals in Lakewood with the intention that this is how they're going to pay their mortgage. Have a short-term rental in Lakewood, play the game while you can, but know that that might change over time. Technically right now, technically where they don't have short-term rental rules and regulations, most of the time they'll tell you like it's just not allowed, but there's usually no enforcement with that. The other question that I get a ton of regarding rules and regulations are, where are the friendly places to short-term rent? Wheat Ridge is currently the most friendly, no restrictions on non-primary resident short-term rentals. They are going to allow up to 2% of the housing stock to be a short-term rental. That's double the number that we've got in Denver here. Arvada allows investors to have short-term rentals up to 3. However, you are restricted to short-term renting to 240 days out of the year. So essentially for 1/3 of the year, you must rent out the property for 30 days or more in Arvada. Longmont, you have to be a resident of Longmont, but you don't have to be the primary resident. So, and then the other place, sort of the loophole that we find is if you have a Denver address that's in Adams County, because Adams County doesn't have rules and restrictions on short-term rentals right now, you can short-term rent that property. So, you know, that it's kind of a small pocket, a small strip. You'll get some of the homes over by Regis University, which would make great short-term rentals. Finding those for your clients is a challenge for sure. And then the other question that we have a lot of regarding the rules and regulations are the mountain towns. And that is where all of the big news is. The mountain towns are, almost all of them are revisiting short-term rental regulations in one way or another. And they are restricting short-term rental rules and short-term rentals in one way or another. Breckenridge was the big one. You know, they're essentially limiting the number of short-term rentals in Breckenridge to 2,000 properties. Currently, there's about 3,500 properties in Breckenridge. Summit County just lifted a moratorium on short-term rental licenses in December. Clear Creek County just added a moratorium on short-term rental licenses. Crested Butte has a 12-month moratorium. So we're seeing a lot of moratoriums and restrictions on the number of short-term rentals out there. So if you have clients that are looking in the mountain towns, it is extremely hard to know exactly what's coming down the pipeline in purchasing a short-term rental investment in the mountains. Plus, the prices have increased so incredibly fast up in the mountains that you really have to do that math to see if you're going to cash flow. I think even before the price increases, it was difficult to cash flow on a short-term rental in the mountain, especially everyone has that dream of like using it every now and then and renting it out and covering the mortgage. To be frank, that's a very difficult thing to do in the mountains. So that's just something that you want to make your clients aware of. I would say the rule of thumb on a short-term rental in the mountains is your take-home income is about, you know, right around 35 to 40% of what your top line income is in the mountains. And on your primary residence, it's much better. So my home in Denver, you know, my take-home income is closer to 85% because of the need for management is not there like it would be on a short-term rental in the mountains. My cleaning costs, supplies, you know, those are my only extraneous costs. Other than that, you know, I already pay for my cable internet. I already furnish my property. I already, you know, make sure the snow is removed and my yard looks nice and things like that. So I don't have, you know, on your primary residence, you don't have a lot of extraneous costs on a short-term rental, which is why it's so incredibly lucrative. Let's see, we've got a couple of questions here. If my client buys a 4-unit and lives in one of the unit, how does that change the rules for primary residence and short-term rental and long-term rental requirements? So Kelly, here in Denver, if your client purchases a 4-unit, when you go to get that loan, it's considered a residential property. It's considered you can qualify for the entire 4 units as your primary residence when you're getting that loan. But with regards to short-term rental regulations, only the unit that your client lives in is their primary residence. So the other 3 units that they do not live in have to be long-term rented out. She can only rent, or he can only rent out the actual unit that they live in. Lisa, with your current build, have you run into any complications since you started that you weren't expecting? That's a good question.
That's a great question, Carrie. We have been so lucky, and I think it's because we're using a company that handles everything from start to finish. We have done nothing but the fun stuff, which is working on the architectural design. We're almost done with that. They literally handled everything. I don't know what the stress level that must occur when someone is trying to do this on their own. So because think of all the things that are required to build a home. It's all of that stuff. It's soil testing, it's an appraisal, it's a survey, all of it. And the one thing that I wasn't surprised about, because they told us about it up front, and that is that Denver has not denied a rezone in a really long time. So what they used to have to do is wait until the rezone was done before they started, moved forward. And we just moved forward. And the rezone is taking 6 to 9 months in Denver right now. So they are slow. They're very backed up. They're backed up on licenses for short-term rentals. It's just kind of what's happening now in Denver. But again, we're certain that they are going to pass the rezone, and we have moved forward. So we're finishing the final docs for exterior. We have most of the interior figured out, and next step is we get to meet with their interior designer to go over all of the inside stuff. So we'll see. I'm very realistic about the fact that construction costs are going to perhaps go up, and they have, of course, told us that could happen, and that there may be a delay just on the construction because of everything that's going on in our world. But we are really lucky in that we are not in any hurry for this. So I think time frame is a big deal, and we always ask our clients about that, how fast they need this to be done. And you have to be really realistic about this. Takes at least a year, a good solid year from start to finish.
I think we have another question here, and probably you and I are going to want to tag team this one, Lisa. If my client finishes their basement with a kitchen, bathroom, living space, etc., is it automatically considered an accessory dwelling unit? Would it then restrict them from building an ADU on their land that's zoned for it?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Sabrina. So let's definitely tag team this one. So it would not automatically be a living. There's so much that goes into it being an accessory dwelling unit. So no, that is not automatic. Currently, we have a client right now who has all of those things in her basement, and she's actually living there, but it's not a legal ADU. So that's an excellent question. The part about having it in the basement and then building, this is exactly a client we have right now. That is going to have to do with where it is, how large the lot is. There's a lot of things that go into that question. So that would be something that I would need to get my hands on and do more work around that. But we literally have a client that just came to us who has a basement right now that she lives in that has all of the things you're mentioning. It's not a legal ADU. She's living in it. And she wants to build something on the land. It also depends on, this actually happens to be a triplex or a duplex, and ADUs are not allowed in triplexes or duplexes at this time. So that's a question that I get all of the time. So totally loaded question, great question. But I'd have to do some digging on that. And Sabrina, you want to talk about the issues that they're going to possibly run into?
Yeah. So, here's the thing with properties that are zoned for ADU, they're typically zoned for one accessory unit, not two. The other thing to keep in mind is that if the property is zoned for ADU, this person hopefully is going through a licensed contractor or someone knowledgeable, and they're going through the permitting processes that they need to go through with this basement unit. Because what we are finding is that the city is being very strict about basement unit rentals as well as accessory dwelling unit rentals. With regards to the short-term rental licensing process right now, what we're finding is that as you go to renew your licenses, if the city sees that you're renting out an accessory dwelling unit, a part of your home, a basement unit, a basement room, or something like that, they are often going in and deciding or requiring to do a zoning inspection of your property. And it is holding up short-term rental licenses for months at a time. And so if that, what we find in Denver, and I don't know if this property is located in Denver, it will definitely be specific to the lot, no matter where you are, is that in Denver, most houses don't permit that second kitchen. And that's a lot of times what prevents you from having a separate unit in your basement in Denver. And so if you've got a kitchen down there and you're renting it out on Airbnb, you go to renew your license, City of Denver is going to do an inspection for you, and they're going to require you to retroactively make sure that you get everything permitted appropriately, which can be very expensive if it wasn't permitted appropriately the first time.
Yeah, we have a client currently, ADU for You. He actually has the most popular Airbnb in Denver. And he just went to renew his license. Suddenly, because all these things are changing, he is not up to code. Permits were not pulled back in the day, and for him to start utilizing it as a short-term rental again, he's going to have to put $100,000 into it. So this is not something that you want to mess up the first time around. It can be incredibly costly, and then of course you're losing the rental income while you do the upgrades. So somebody asked a question that made me consider that if it is currently being utilized one way or the other, do your due diligence, because that maybe was done back in the day. And you guys now know that long-term renters in 2023 are going to require a license and an inspection. So just, I just always say, do it right the first time, because it can be incredibly costly if you work under an assumption and don't really dig and make sure that it was done right and it is up to code to be able to shorter long-term rent.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because I know we had some questions about politically how all of this works, just to speak to the politics behind all of this, is the idea that accessory dwelling units are being encouraged is to really help those lower and the middle income homeowners gain wealth and to make more affordable housing in the city. And so I am on the board of Mile High Hosts. We're kind of in the know with how the city is treating these short-term rental licenses and renewals. And the fact that they are now not being very friendly towards accessory dwelling units after really clearly establishing a few years ago that accessory dwelling units were great short-term rentals. The speculation behind that is that the reason the city is being so strict on that is that the city wants to encourage people to make these accessory dwelling units long-term rentals so that they can increase the housing stock for long-term renters out there. And with the increased supply, the hope is that the housing stays affordable. That's also a lot of the political conversation that's happening up in the mountains as well. And in the mountains, it's extremely tricky because we have kind of this chicken and an egg problem, because a lot of these mountain and resort towns, they are fully dependent on tourism to keep these towns alive. But what's happened, it's become so expensive to live up there that there's no place for the workforce to live. And part of what a lot of people are pointing to is, well, everybody has a short-term rental, or everyone has a second home that just, sits there vacant when they're not using it. And so that's why a lot of these short-term rental rules and regulations are being revisited in the mountain towns as well. But at the same time, you don't want to restrict these places for people to stay too much, because then you reduce the tourism, which helps to keep the town alive and and nobody really knows like if short-term rentals are the actual cause of all of this, or if it's just that there's a limited amount of building available, up in the mountains and the resorts. So it's very, very complicated politically. But there is certainly overall, I think everyone's in agreement that we need more short-term housing, or I'm sorry, more affordable housing. How we get there is, I think, where people disagree on this subject.
Yeah, and some of it is simply people who are misguided. Remember when Denver, the people who were against short-term rentals for so long thought that it was an issue with low income and affordable housing. Well, short-term rentals in Denver is only 1% of the housing stock. So that, again, once research, et cetera, is done, a lot of times just by the number, you can explain, what is going on here much more clearly than just what they think is going on. We know that only 16% of accessory dwelling units in Denver are even being used for short-term rentals. I was shocked by that statistic. That's a really low. So people who are super concerned about these being short-term rentals, are not doing the research, right? 16%. Another thing that we see is that a lot of times these accessory dwelling units start as short-term rentals and eventually become long-term ones. So again, there's so much data that we need to research, find, and put out there for people who are questioning the use of this stuff. We have a question from Heidi. So you couldn't add an ADU above an existing garage if it's within the existing 7,500 square feet lot. I think what you're asking is you couldn't add an ADU if it was not 7,500 square feet minimum of the lot. And that's just the rule on accessory dwelling units. I mean, it's completely lot size based on whether or not you can do it and how large the accessory dwelling unit can be. And again, some of these things may be changing as this committee digs deeper, but yeah, that is currently the rule. I want to add on to that because there are a lot of people, I get a lot of calls of people who just say, I'm just going to pop an ADU above a garage. Well, Sabrina, you and I know that that cannot be done, and it definitely cannot be done in Colorado because of our weather. So there's a few things going on here. California is blanket rezoned for ADUs. And in California, because of their weather, many times you can just pop an ADU on top of a garage. So people who are coming from states like Washington, California, that are blanket rezoned for ADUs don't always understand that it takes more here in Denver. So, many times we have to redo the garage because it just isn't up to code to support an ADU. And that's because of, what am I trying to say here? The frost protection we're going to need, right, in Denver. We are going to need insulation here, proper insulation here in Denver. We are going to need, I'm losing the,
yeah, I mean, essentially the foundations need to be redone on these garages is what it comes down to. So the whole thing comes down and you rebuild.
Yeah, exactly. So again, that's another way that you can kind of vet your buyers, is to say that it's just not that easy. It's not that simple to just pop an ADU on top of a garage. And that's a big misconception as well. And we find many, many times that we just have to redo the garage. And that's plan B for us, is to redo our existing garage, and we're gonna have to redo the whole thing.
Yeah, and then I think, to be clear, Lisa, that 7,500 square foot, that rule is for Lakewood only.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Denver has different lot requirements than Lakewood.
Yeah,
and then
that's what makes it clear as mud is that every city and county has different rules and regulations. So again, same with short-term rental, you guys, and same with accessory dwelling unit. It is different city by city and county by county.
Exactly. And what makes it even more complicated, we have a question here: is Airbnb allowed in a non-primary house in Golden? The answer is no. It does need to be your primary residence. Like I said, all over Denver Metro, essentially it needs to be your primary residence, with exception to the couple of places that I've mentioned that actually have established rules for non-primary resident short-term rental. The other thing that makes primary resident, the primary residence requirements even more complicated is that the definition of primary residence is also different city by city and county by county. So a lot of cities have adopted the straight, you need to be in the home 50% of the time in order for it to be your primary residence. Someone had asked, I believe it was about Littleton to qualify for primary residence. In Littleton, you have to be in the home 9 months out of the year for the home to be a primary residence. In Denver, we have this incredibly subjective definition of primary residence where they're looking at a number of different factors in conjunction with one another. And it depends on the mood of the person reviewing your application that day, whether or not it'll be considered your primary residence or not, essentially. So Denver doesn't officially have a 50% rule, but I do know that if you are not staying in your home 50% of the time, that does flag your application and they do review it a little bit more carefully. But Denver is looking at, they can see where you own properties elsewhere throughout not only Colorado, but nationwide. They're looking to determine if any of those properties might be your primary residence instead. They are reviewing all of your voters' registrations, your car registration, your billing addresses. Is there a mismatch anywhere? I even had a client that went to apply for her short-term rental license and she provided the utility bill for their home. Her husband's name was on it and they made her resubmit it, even though she and her husband live there together as their primary residence. So they're being pretty particular about the renewals in Denver, and they're just looking at multiple factors. I constantly have people ask me, how can I get around these short-term rental rules in Denver and it being my primary residence? And my answer to you is, do not even try. It will be a waste of time and money for you. The only loophole that we have in Denver that a lot of cities don't have is that a renter can be a primary resident on the property and is allowed to short-term rent. So if you are a homeowner, you could place a renter in your home, allow them to be the primary residence. They would have the short-term rental license, and then you can work out some sort of a deal on the back end where you split the short-term rental revenue, or the tenant is completely hands-off and you do all of it. That's really the only way around it. There's a company called Loftium that works in Denver that basically sets up that situation for landlords and renters. So that's our loophole in Denver. But for the most part, these cities are very strict about it. They're using compliance software, so they can see everything that you do. They know where you're listed. They know how often you're rented out. They probably know how much you rent out for. They probably see the names of the people you're renting to, for all we know. I mean, they really know everything. So it's definitely hard to slide around the rules in most of these areas.
Yeah, Denver just got new compliance software that can basically brush your teeth for you. So I wouldn't mess in Denver.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess with Denver, and I'd be careful about any other cities, to be frank. Your best bet is to go on the up and up with everything. If you're looking in an area where maybe they haven't established rules yet, like for example, someone had asked about Castle Rock. There's no rules there right now, but you do have to pay the lodging tax in Castle Rock. Or Westminster is another good example where there's really, like, they talked about making rules, but they just never got around to it. I would say, ride that wave while you can, but it will probably go away, and expect that to go away when you make that investment, and tell your clients that too, that things will change.
Yeah, they need to be flexible. So we have a question about, is there any updates where you can find blanket rezones for ADU in Denver or surrounding cities? And I'm so sorry, no, there isn't. And again, we are working on that, but the places that I told you are currently the ones that have been blanket rezoned, Callie. And just continue to check in with me Denverite, I don't know if you guys, I would definitely make sure that you're reading the Denverite. They are really, really on the pulse of accessory dwelling units and are a great resource. So definitely. Oh, sure, Callie, I'll go ahead and tell you that again. So guys, the right now, the areas that are blanket rezoned for ADUs are Chaffee Park, East and West Colfax, Sloan's Lake. And that's it, correct, Sabrina, for the ones that are actually rezoned. The ones that are in the works are Regis Berkeley, Villa Park, Barnum and Barnum West, Valverde, Athmar Park, and Athmar Park, because East Colfax just did it.
Yeah, and I forgot what I was going to say, so I guess I'll let you keep going. So I think let's do this. Let's take a little break and do a poll, and then there's a few questions that I know that people had asked when they registered that I want to address quickly, and we're getting close to our hour already. So I'm going to just take a moment to put this poll up. This helps Lisa and I get more information to you, and helps us cater our classes and things like that. So if you could just take a quick moment to do the poll, we'd really appreciate it. I'll leave it up for like 30, 35 seconds or something like that for everybody. All right, it looks like the responses have slowed down here. I'll share the results. Thank you. Almost everybody participated, which is great. So we will keep this in mind as we move forward. So the one thing I did want to mention is we did have a lot of people ask how they figure out the rules and regulations for both accessory dwelling units and short-term rentals. The answer to short-term rentals is a little bit easier than accessory dwelling units. Most city and county websites have published the rules and regulations for short-term rentals on their government websites. So I always recommend Googling whatever your area is, short-term rental rules and regulations, and usually the city or county website will come up. Go straight there to find out what the rules and regulations are. Do not go to the latest news article that pops up or anything like that, because we just don't know. The information is ever changing, and we don't know if you're reading a news article that's not from the city or county, if that's the most updated information. So that's what I recommend for learning what the rules are with regards to short-term rentals. Can you say that resource again, Denver something or other? Lisa,
Yeah, it's Denverite, DENVERITE, and it's a newspaper here in Denver.
Yeah.
Another great way to stay up to date on things is to attend the STRAC meetings, short-term rental advisory committee meetings. You can get the schedule of those on Denver's website. And I'm assuming that you're going to be able to tune in or at least get a recording at some point for this ADU in Denver advisory committee, but I don't know that yet. So stay tuned on that.
Yep. And then we definitely have people that are curious also about analyzing short-term rental investments, how the whole actual logistics of Airbnb and short-term rental works. airdna.co, and we'll send this out in a follow-up email, is a great place for analyzing these investments. And then, the logistics on how short-term rental works that's a whole 2-hour class all by itself. So I recommend if you're in that process, just go ahead and reach out to me and we can figure out how we can help you out on that. So.
Yeah, and for those of you who are interested in building an accessory dwelling unit or have clients who are, please let me know. I'll get that information. I have a lot of agents that connect with me to say, we want to make an offer on this house, but I need this information. And I try to get that to you as rapidly as possible.
Yep. And then the last question we have is, how do you reach out to us? Feel free to respond to that follow-up email that we send out. That will be the easiest way for you guys to get a hold of us, and we will direct you to the correct place. So thank you so much, everybody. We've really enjoyed having you. Great questions. Lisa, Spence, thank you so much for hosting us today. And looking forward to talking to everybody soon. Lisa, did you want to say anything?
I just put our email addresses in the
Oh,
chat.
perfect.
You guys will definitely get a follow-up email and actually a recording of this Q&A. So thank you so much for attending our biggest Q&A on this snowy day. So much fun to be with you guys. As you can tell, we're absolutely passionate about this. So please connect with us if you have any further questions. Stay warm, my friends. Have a great one.
Bye.